I'm Samantha Mitchell, 34, and my relationship with my parents has always been complicated. Growing up with a mother who criticized my every move and a father who secretly nurtured my dreams created a storm of confusion. Mom never thought I'd amount to much in the culinary world, always reminding me I wouldn't succeed. When I suggested taking Dad to an upscale restaurant for his 65th birthday, Mom scoffed, saying I couldn't possibly afford it. Little did she know, the staff would soon greet me as the owner. If you're enjoying this story so far, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how this family dinner turned into the confrontation that changed everything. My earliest memories of childhood always feature two contrasting parental figures. My father. He'd return from work with stories about his students' kitchen disasters that would make us laugh until our sides hurt. His passion for food transcended the limitations of our small kitchen, transforming simple ingredients into meals that made our modest dining table feel like a five-star restaurant. Cooking is about love, Sammy, he'd tell me while showing me how to properly hold a chef's knife. You put your heart into the food, and people can taste it. In stark contrast, my mother came from the wealthy Anderson family, where appearances and social status reigned supreme. She'd grown up with household staff and country club memberships, and marrying a teacher had been her act of rebellion against her parents. A rebellion she seemed to regret more with each passing year. Standing over a hot stove is servant's work, Samantha, she'd say when catching me helping Dad prepare dinner. You should be focusing on your studies so you can become a lawyer or businesswoman. Something respectable. The financial tension in our home was a constant undercurrent. Mom's taste for designer clothes and luxury items strained Dad's teacher salary. She'd return from shopping trips with bags from expensive stores, while Dad quietly adjusted the household budget to accommodate her spending. When I turned 14, I got my first job bussing tables at a local family restaurant. I was proud of my independence, saving money for culinary school and learning the inner workings of a professional kitchen. Dad would pick me up after shifts, listening intently as I excitedly shared everything I'd observed. Mom, however, was mortified when she discovered where I was working. A Mitchell girl, clearing dirty plates? What will people think? She demanded, as if I'd committed some terrible social transgression. Despite her objections, I kept the job. Dad secretly encouraged me, slipping me handwritten copies of old family recipes on yellowed index cards. These are from your grandmother, he'd whisper, as if passing classified documents. She was the best cook I ever knew. Better than me, even. I think you've got her touch. My 16th birthday became a turning point in our family dynamic. Dad saved for months to buy me a professional chef's knife set, each blade gleaming with possibility. I'd unwrapped the gift with trembling hands, overcome with emotion at such a vote of confidence in my future. Mom had walked in just as Dad was showing me how to properly sharpen the knives. You bought her what? She'd exclaimed, examining the price tag still attached to the case. James, this is ridiculous. She needs SAT prep books, not knives. The next day, I'd come home from school to find Mom boxing up my gift. I'm returning these tomorrow, she announced. I've already signed you up for college prep courses instead. That's a much better investment in your future. Dad and I had exchanged looks across the room, a silent communication of shared disappointment. Later that night, the knife set mysteriously reappeared in my room with a note in Dad's handwriting. Hide these well. Your future is yours to carve. That night crystallized what I'd always known but couldn't articulate. My parents were pulling me in opposite directions, and eventually, I'd have to choose a path. Following high school graduation, I reluctantly enrolled in the business program at State University, just as Mother had planned. Her vision for my future was crystal clear. A business degree would lead to a corporate job with stability, prestige, and the financial security she valued above all else. This is an investment in your future, Samantha, she reminded me while writing the tuition check, her signature flowing with practiced elegance. Unlike your father's hobby. What Mother didn't know was that for every marketing and economics class on my official schedule, I had secretly registered for a culinary elective. These weren't for credit, they were for me. While other students spent their free time at parties, I was perfecting my brunoise technique and learning the 5 mother sauces. During my sophomore year, fate intervened in the form of Chef Anthony Russo, a guest lecturer in one of my unauthorized culinary classes. He noticed my technique during a practical demonstration and approached me after class. "You have natural talent," he said, his Italian accent thickening with enthusiasm. "Where did you train before this?" "My dad's kitchen," I answered honestly. Chef Russo owned Trattoria Milano, one of the city's most respected Italian restaurants. By the following weekend, I was working there, starting as a prep cook and soaking up every bit of knowledge I could. The restaurant became my real education. I scheduled all my business classes for mornings and early afternoons, leaving evenings and weekends free for the kitchen. Dad visited me at Trattoria Milano one night, sitting at the bar and ordering dish after dish that I had helped prepare. The pride in his eyes when Chef Russo told him about my progress brought tears to my own. "She has the touch," Chef Russo told my father. "A natural instinct that cannot be taught." "She gets that from her grandmother," Dad replied, his voice thick with emotion. For nearly 2 years, I maintained this double life. Business student by day, budding chef by night. The deception weighed on me, but the kitchen brought me alive in ways that spreadsheets and market analyses never could. Then came the fateful Sunday when Mother made a surprise visit to campus. She'd arrived unannounced, intending to take me shopping and to dinner. When she couldn't find me in my dorm or the library, she called repeatedly. I missed the calls, hands deep in pasta dough preparation for the evening service. When I finally checked my phone during a break, I had 12 missed calls and a text saying she was tracking my phone location. 20 minutes later, she walked into Trattoria Milano, her Louboutin heels clicking accusatorily against the tile floor. "So this is why your grades are slipping," she said, her voice carrying across the kitchen. "Playing cook instead of focusing on your future." Chef Russo attempted to intervene, telling her about my talent and progress, but Mother wasn't interested. "Thank you for your input, but you don't understand what's at stake here," she told him dismissively. "Samantha has potential for real success, not just this." She gestured around the kitchen as if it were a crime scene rather than one of the city's most acclaimed restaurants. The drive back to campus was silent until Mother delivered her ultimatum. "If you continue with this restaurant nonsense, I will stop paying for your education. It's time to grow up, Samantha." The next morning, I made my decision. I walked into the registrar's office and withdrew from the business program, just 3 semesters shy of graduation. Then I called Chef Russo and accepted his offer of a full-time position. That evening, I met my parents at a coffee shop near campus to tell them. Dad seemed unsurprised, almost resigned to the inevitable confrontation. Mother was livid. "You're throwing away everything we've worked for," she said, her voice controlled but trembling with anger. "Everything I've sacrificed to give you opportunities. They were your opportunities." "Mom." "Not mine," I replied, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. "I'm making my own path now." "By becoming a servant? By throwing away your education to chop vegetables?" She laughed bitterly. "This is what happens, James, when you fill her head with unrealistic fantasies instead of practical guidance." Dad finally spoke up. "Diane, cooking isn't just about." "Don't," she cut him off. "Don't defend this. If she wants to waste her potential, that's her choice. But I won't finance it or watch it happen." She stood up, gathering her designer purse. "When you come to your senses, Samantha, you know where to find us. Until then, you're on your own." As she walked out, Dad gave my hand a quick squeeze. "She'll come around," he whispered, though his eyes held doubt. "Give her time." But Mother didn't come around. I moved out completely the following weekend, taking only what I could fit in my small car. Dad helped me secretly, slipping me some cash and kitchen equipment when Mother wasn't looking. "She loves you, Sammy," he said while hugging me goodbye. "She just shows it by wanting security for you. Give her time." Time, however, only widened the distance. Mother effectively disowned me, refusing to take my calls or acknowledge my existence at family gatherings. Dad maintained contact through secret lunch meetings and phone calls, becoming the tenuous bridge between my new life and my past. The early years were harder than I'd anticipated. I worked multiple jobs: line cook at Trattoria Milano during dinner service, pastry assistant at a bakery in the mornings, catering gigs on weekends. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but it was mine, paid for with money I earned doing what I loved. During those lean years, Mother's warnings about financial struggle echoed in my mind during late nights when I counted tips to make rent. But each morning, I'd wake up eager to get back into the kitchen. A feeling I'd never experienced thinking about business meetings or corporate ladder climbing. That eagerness sustained me through the hardest times, a compass pointing me forward when the path seemed impossible to navigate. My journey through the culinary world wasn't the straight line to success that movies portray. It was a zigzagging path of 12-hour shifts, burns and cuts, critical chefs, and nights when I questioned every decision that led me to this life. I moved from line cook at Trattoria Milano to guard manger at a French bistro, then to pastry assistant, and finally to sous chef at an innovative farm-to-table restaurant called Harvest. It was at Harvest that I met Gabriela Rodriguez, the restaurant's passionate and outspoken general manager. Where I was methodical and precise, Gabriela was all intuition and bold flavors. Our contrasting approaches created a dynamic that elevated the dining experience, with regular customers specifically requesting my dishes paired with her wine selections. "We should do this for ourselves," Gabriela said one night as we shared a drink after closing. "Create a place that's truly ours." The idea took root, growing stronger each time a customer complimented a special I'd created or when the owner took credit for concepts Gabriela and I had developed. We began meeting on Sundays, our only mutual day off, sketching ideas on napkins and dreaming about a restaurant that would combine my technical precision with Gabriela's flair for hospitality. Our concept was simple but meaningful: a farm-to-table restaurant named Homestead that would honor family recipes and local traditions while elevating them through modern techniques. We wanted to create food that told a story, that connected diners to memories and emotions beyond just flavor. Turning that dream into reality proved brutally difficult. We approached 8 different banks for loans, each one rejecting us with varying degrees of condescension. One loan officer actually laughed at our business plan. 2 women with no business background opening a high-end restaurant? "The statistics are against you," he said, not even bothering to look through our carefully prepared projections. His dismissal reminded me so much of my mother that it rekindled my determination rather than diminishing it. Gabriela and I pooled our savings, secured a small business loan from a community development program specifically supporting women entrepreneurs, and found a location in an up-and-coming neighborhood that we could almost afford. The building was a disaster, a former hardware store with cracked floors, outdated electrical systems, and a kitchen that existed only in our imagination. We did much of the renovation work ourselves, learning plumbing and tiling from YouTube videos, painting until 3 in the morning after our day jobs, and stretching every dollar until it screamed. 3 weeks before our scheduled opening, we ran out of money completely. I sat on the half-finished dining room floor with Gabriela, both of us too exhausted to cry. "Maybe this was a mistake," I whispered, the words burning my throat. Gabriela looked around at our unfinished dream, then back at me with unwavering determination. "No, we're too close. I know someone who might help." Her cousin's husband worked construction and agreed to finish the essential work in exchange for a small ownership percentage. We pushed the opening back 2 weeks, worked around the clock. And somehow, against all odds, Homestead opened its doors on a rainy Tuesday evening. The first weeks were rough. We had mixed reviews, operational chaos, and barely enough customers to keep the lights on. Gabriela and I took no salary, pouring everything back into improving the restaurant. I thought of calling my father for advice or even financial help, but pride stopped me. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms. Then came the night that changed everything. Jordan Walsh, the city's most influential food critic, walked in unannounced. I recognized him immediately from his profile picture and nearly dropped the plate I was carrying. With shaking hands, I prepared his order personally, my grandmother's braised short ribs reimagined with local mushrooms and a red wine reduction. His review, published the following Sunday, called Homestead a revelation and my cooking technically flawless yet soulful, like a perfect piece of music played with both precision and passion. He specifically mentioned the short ribs, writing that they transported him to a childhood he never had but suddenly missed desperately. Business doubled overnight. Within 3 months, we had waiting lists every weekend. 6 months in, we were profitable enough to hire additional staff and finally pay ourselves. A year after opening, Homestead won the city's Best New Restaurant Award, with my picture in the local paper accepting the honor. When registering the business, I had deliberately used SM Ventures as our official company name, keeping my full identity as owner somewhat obscured. I gave interviews rarely and always focused on the food rather than my personal story. This wasn't just about privacy, it was self-protection. I couldn't bear the thought of my mother seeing my success and dismissing it, or worse, claiming she had been right all along to push me toward business school since I'd ended up running one anyway. Dad knew I owned a restaurant, but not which one or how successful it had become. During our occasional lunches, I kept the conversation general, mentioning challenges but downplaying achievements. I told myself it was to protect him from having to keep secrets from Mom, but truthfully, I was protecting myself from potential disappointment. What if he visited and didn't like it? What if he thought I'd made the wrong choice after all? Meanwhile, Homestead continued to thrive. We expanded the dining room, earned a prestigious industry award for sustainability practices, and began planning a second location focused on breakfast and lunch service. Food and Wine magazine included me in their Chefs to Watch list, though I declined their request for a professional photo shoot, sending instead a simple headshot that wouldn't circulate widely. Through it all, I kept my success hidden from my family, creating a strange double life where I was respected and accomplished in my professional world, but still somehow the family disappointment who had thrown away her potential. The disconnect became increasingly difficult to maintain, especially when Dad's health began showing signs of strain. During one of our secret lunches, I noticed him wincing slightly as he reached for his water glass. "You okay, Dad?" I asked, instantly concerned. "Just getting old, Sammy," he deflected with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Doctor says I need to watch my cholesterol. Nothing serious." But the way he avoided eye contact told me there was more to the story. Later that week, I called his doctor friend Tom, who had been our family physician since I was a child. Medical privacy laws prevented him from sharing details, but his careful suggestion that now might be a good time to reconnect with family sent a chill through me. My father's mortality suddenly became real in a way it hadn't before, making the distance I'd maintained feel foolish rather than protective. With his 65th birthday approaching, I decided it was time to bridge the gap, whatever the cost to my pride. For 5 years, my contact with Mother had been reduced to obligatory Christmas cards and the occasional stilted phone call when something important happened in the extended family. Our conversations were superficial, focusing on distant relatives or neighborhood gossip rather than anything meaningful. She never asked about my work, and I never volunteered information about my success. My relationship with Dad was warmer but limited by necessity. We met for lunch every few months at a diner halfway between my restaurant and his school. He'd retired from full-time teaching, but still worked as a substitute and culinary program consultant. These meetings were our shared secret, filled with genuine connection, but shadowed by the need for discretion. When I learned through a cousin that plans were brewing for Dad's 65th birthday, I felt a familiar knot of exclusion tightening in my stomach. 5 years of distance suddenly seemed petty in the face of Dad's declining health. Tom's veiled warning echoed in my mind. Time might be running out for reconciliation. I made the decision to reach out directly to Mother, something I hadn't done in years. My hand trembled slightly as I dialed her number one Tuesday morning before prep began at Homestead. "Samantha," she answered, her voice as crisp and controlled as ever. This is unexpected. Hi. Mom, I said, hating how easily I reverted to feeling like an insecure teenager. How are you? I'm fine. Your father has some blood pressure issues. But he's too stubborn to follow the doctor's recommendations properly. That was Mother. No pleasantries, straight to information delivery with a side of criticism. Some things never changed. Actually, that's part of why I'm calling, I continued. I heard about Dad's birthday coming up, and I'd like to take both of you out for dinner to celebrate. The silence lasted so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. You want to take us to dinner? She finally asked, skepticism evident in every syllable. Yes. Somewhere nice. It's an important birthday, and I'd like to do something special for Dad. Another pause, this one calculating rather than surprised. That's considerate of you, Samantha. But are you sure you can afford the type of restaurant your father deserves? I know restaurant work isn't particularly lucrative. There it was, the familiar dismissal wrapped in concern. I swallowed my instinctive defensive response. I've been doing well, Mom. I can afford a nice dinner. Well, she said, in a tone that clearly communicated doubt, if you insist. But I should select the restaurant. I know what your father likes and which establishments are appropriate for such an occasion. I closed my eyes, counting to 5 silently before responding. That's fine. You choose. There's a new place called Homestead that's apparently quite good, she said, unaware of the irony saturating her words. Very difficult to get reservations. But I know the maitre d' at the Four Seasons who might be able to pull some strings. My heart stopped, then raced. Of all the restaurants in the city, she had chosen mine. The universe apparently had a twisted sense of humor. I've heard of it, I managed. I'll see what I can arrange. Your father's birthday is on the 17th. Does that work for your schedule? She said the last word as if my work consisted of optional social engagements rather than 14-hour days running a successful business. The 17th is perfect, I confirmed, my mind already spinning with possibilities and complications. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. Mother had unknowingly selected my restaurant for Dad's birthday dinner. What were the odds? I laughed until tears came. The kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes when life's absurdity exceeds your capacity to respond rationally. I had 2 options. I could call her back and suggest another restaurant, maintaining my secret success, but losing the perfect opportunity for revelation. Or I could let the plan proceed and face whatever consequences unfolded when they discovered the truth. The choice crystallized when I thought of Dad's face, imagining his reaction when he realized the restaurant Mother had deemed worthy of his special occasion was actually his daughter's creation. That potential moment of pride and vindication outweighed all risks. Planning began immediately. I designed a special tasting menu incorporating elements of Dad's favorite dishes with my own creative interpretations. His beloved beef stew became a sophisticated short rib with red wine reduction. His apple pie transformed into a deconstructed apple tart with cinnamon ice cream and salted caramel. I briefed the staff carefully, swearing them to secrecy about my ownership until the right moment. Luis, my head chef, grinned mischievously when I explained the situation. So we're going to surprise your parents? I love it, he said. Don't worry, we'll make it perfect. Gabriella handled the reservation personally, booking my parents at our best table without revealing the connection to our clueless hostess. Table 9. VIP treatment, special menu approved by Chef Samantha herself, she wrote in the reservation notes with a wink. As the day approached, my anxiety increased exponentially. Mother called twice with concerns about the restaurant's suitability. Are you sure you can handle this place, Samantha? She asked during our second call. I've been reading reviews. And it's quite exclusive. The bill will be substantial. I can handle it, Mom, I assured her, fighting back the urge to reveal everything prematurely. Well, please dress appropriately. She continued. No jeans or casual attire. This is a sophisticated establishment, and I don't want you to embarrass us. The irony of being lectured about appropriate attire for my own restaurant almost broke my composure, but I maintained the charade. I'll dress properly, I promise. And please arrive on time. Punctuality shows respect. I'll be there at 7 sharp, I confirmed. The night before the dinner, I barely slept, rehearsing possible scenarios in my mind. Would Mother be proud once she knew the truth, or would she find some way to diminish my accomplishment? Would Dad be pleased or hurt that I'd kept this success from him? The questions circled like hungry wolves, keeping rest at bay until dawn crept through my bedroom window. The day of the dinner, I spent extra time on my appearance. Choosing a black dress that was elegant without being flashy, styling my hair in a simple updo, applying makeup that enhanced without overwhelming. Mother had always criticized my appearance. Tonight, I wanted to be beyond reproach. I arrived at Homestead 30 minutes early, using the staff entrance and checking final details with the kitchen and service team. Everything was perfect, the special menu printed, Dad's favorite bourbon available at the bar, the table decorated with subtle touches that referenced family memories. At precisely 7, I walked around the block and entered through the front door, just another guest arriving for dinner. The hostess, Amy, greeted me with a conspiratorial smile. "Good evening, Miss Mitchell. Your guests haven't arrived yet. Would you like to wait at the bar?" "That would be perfect," I replied, heart pounding with anticipation and dread in equal measure. I ordered a glass of wine and watched the door, rehearsing my greeting one last time. At 7:15, my parents walked in. Dad looking distinguished in a blue suit that I recognized from their anniversary dinner 5 years ago. Mother elegant and intimidating in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. From my position at the bar, I watched Amy greet my parents with professional warmth. Mother immediately took control of the interaction, mentioning this special occasion and her connections that had secured this difficult reservation. Dad stood slightly behind her, his eyes taking in the restaurant with genuine appreciation. I took a deep breath and approached them, noticing how Dad's face lit up when he saw me while Mother's expression shifted immediately to assessment mode. "Samantha," she said, her eyes scanning my outfit. "You're on time, good. Though that dress is a bit plain for an establishment of this caliber." "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, ignoring her comment and embracing my father. He felt thinner than the last time we'd met, but his hug was still strong and comforting. "Thanks, Sammy," he whispered. "It means a lot that you're here." Amy led us to table 9, the best in the house, positioned perfectly to see both the open kitchen and the garden terrace beyond the windows. Mother walked with the confident air of someone accustomed to fine dining, nodding approvingly at the elegant place settings and fresh flower arrangement. "This seems adequate," she pronounced, as if granting royal approval. "The reviews mentioned exceptional service, so we shall see if they live up to their reputation." Dad caught my eye and gave a small apologetic smile as we took our seats. The server, Michael, approached with practiced grace, presenting the evening's special menus. "Good evening and welcome to Homestead. Tonight we have a special tasting menu prepared exclusively for your celebration," he said, placing the custom-printed menus before us. Mother immediately opened hers, scanning the offerings with a critical eye. "No prices listed," she noted with a slight frown. "That's concerning. It's a fixed price for the tasting menu, Mom," I explained. "Don't worry about it." "I'm not worried, Samantha. I'm simply making sure you understand what you've committed to. This type of dining experience isn't inexpensive." Michael maintained his professional demeanor. "Would you care to begin with a cocktail or perhaps champagne for the celebration?" Before I could respond, Mother interjected. "We'll have a bottle of the View of Cliquot." "Actually," I said, finding my voice, "Dad prefers bourbon to champagne. Could we have 1 Buffalo Trace neat for him? And perhaps you and I could share the champagne, Mom." Dad looked surprised and touched that I'd remembered his preference. Mother's lips thinned slightly at the correction. "Very good." Michael nodded, jotting down the order. "I'll be right back with your drinks." As Michael departed, Mother leaned forward. "Samantha, when hosting at a fine establishment, one orders champagne for celebrations. It's the proper thing to do." "But Dad doesn't enjoy champagne," I countered softly. "This dinner is for him, isn't it?" Dad reached across the table and patted my hand. It's fine, both of you. I'm just happy to have my girls together again. That's the best gift. The bourbon and champagne arrived promptly. Mother took a sip of the champagne and gave a small nod of approval before launching into a detailed account of their neighbor's recent divorce scandal. I half listened, watching Dad's face as he savored his bourbon, his expression softening with pleasure at the familiar taste. The first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche of tomato water spheres with basil oil and sea salt. Mother paused her gossip to examine the dish with suspicion. Very avant-garde, she commented, cautiously trying a sphere. Her eyebrows raised slightly in surprise at the burst of flavor. Dad tried his and broke into a genuine smile. This reminds me of the tomatoes we used to grow in the backyard, remember? When Sammy was little and would eat them straight off the vine. I nodded, warmth spreading through me at the shared memory and his enjoyment of my creation. As each course arrived, the pattern continued. Mother finding small details to critique, the lighting too dim, the music slightly too loud, the servers approaching from the wrong side, while Dad simply enjoyed the experience with increasing delight. These short ribs are extraordinary, he exclaimed over the main course, closing his eyes to savor the flavors. They remind me of my mother's recipe, but with something elevated about them. That's because they are based on Grandma's recipe, I wanted to say, but held my tongue. The revelation would come soon enough. By the fourth course, Mother's critical comments extended to the staff. When Michael brought the palate cleanser, a lemon verbena sorbet with candied citrus, she stopped him with a raised hand. Young man, this table hasn't been properly crumbed between courses, and my water glass has remained half empty for several minutes. For an establishment with this reputation, the service is surprisingly inattentive. Michael's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine confusion. I apologize, ma'am. I'll address that immediately. As he hurried away, Dad looked embarrassed. Diane, the service has been excellent. There's no need to find fault. I'm not finding fault, James. I'm ensuring we receive the experience we're paying for, she replied. Or rather, that Samantha is paying for. Though how she's affording this remains a mystery. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting blood as I forced myself to remain calm. This was not the moment for revelation, not when Mother was in fault-finding mode. The situation deteriorated during the next course. Mother's complaints became more pointed, her voice rising just enough to draw glances from nearby tables. Dad's earlier enjoyment dimmed, replaced by the familiar look of a man trying to minimize damage. Perhaps the restaurant is understaffed tonight, he suggested quietly after Mother complained about the pacing between courses. That's no excuse, she replied. If they can't handle the volume, they shouldn't accept the reservations. I watched the staff exchange glances, aware that my team was witnessing this uncomfortable family dynamic. Gabriella caught my eye from across the room, silently asking if I wanted her to intervene. I gave a small head shake. This needed to play out, however painfully. The pivotal moment arrived with the dessert course. Luis, my head chef, emerged from the kitchen carrying a special plate, a deconstructed apple pie with "Happy Birthday" written in caramel across the edge. It wasn't our normal practice for the head chef to deliver dishes, but this was part of our carefully orchestrated plan. Luis approached our table with a warm smile. "Happy birthday, sir." Chef Samantha wanted to present this special dessert herself, but she's handling an issue in the kitchen. She asked me to extend her personal wishes for a wonderful celebration. Mother's head snapped up at the familiar use of my name. Dad looked confused but pleased. "You know my daughter?" he asked. Luis looked momentarily confused. Then understanding dawned in his eyes as he realized they didn't know. He glanced at me, uncertainty clear in his expression. In that suspended moment, I made my decision. I nodded slightly, giving him permission for the truth. "Know her?" Luis said with a laugh. "Sir, Chef Samantha is my boss. She owns Homestead." The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's fork froze halfway to his mouth, his eyes widening as he turned to look at me. Mother's face went through a rapid succession of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, A dawning realization. That's impossible, she said flatly. Samantha works in a restaurant. She doesn't own one. Especially not this one. Luis stood his ground, though I could see his discomfort at being caught in our family drama. Ma'am, Samantha Mitchell has been the owner and executive chef of Homestead since we opened 4 years ago. She's won multiple awards, and we're opening a second location next month. Dad's expression transformed into one of astonished pride. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at me, searching for confirmation. Sammy? Is this true? Before I could answer, Mother interjected, her voice rising. This is absurd. This is clearly some kind of misunderstanding or worse. A setup to embarrass me. Other staff members, sensing the tension, had gravitated toward our table. Gabriella appeared at Luis's side, her protective instincts clearly activated. Is everything all right here? She asked, her tone professional but with an edge of steel. No, everything is not all right, Mother replied, her voice carrying across the now hushed dining room. This man is making ridiculous claims about my daughter. Gabriella looked at me, then back at my mother. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Gabriella Rodriguez, co-owner of Homestead with your daughter. There's no mistake. Samantha conceptualized this restaurant, secured our financing, and has been the creative force behind our success from day one. The confirmation from a second source seemed to finally penetrate Mother's denial. She turned to me, her face flushed with a complex mix of emotions. You've owned this restaurant all this time and never told us? What kind of game are you playing, Samantha? It's not a game, Mom, I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. I wanted to succeed on my own terms without what? She demanded. Without having my accomplishments dismissed or minimized, I finished quietly. Dad reached for my hand across the table, his eyes shining with emotion. Sammy, I had no idea it was on this level. This place is. It's magnificent. And it's yours. Before I could answer, Mother pushed back her chair abruptly. I see what this is. This entire evening has been orchestrated to humiliate me, to prove me wrong in some juvenile display of rebellion. Mom, that's not, I began, but she cut me off. 5 years of barely speaking to us, and this is how you choose to reconnect? By ambushing us in public? Her voice had risen enough that every diner in our section was now openly watching the drama unfold. My carefully planned evening was disintegrating into exactly the kind of scene I had hoped to avoid. Diane, please, Dad said, his voice strained. This isn't the place for. He stopped mid-sentence, his hand suddenly going to his chest. A look of discomfort crossed his face, followed by a grimace of pain. Dad, I said, alarm rising in my throat. Dad, what's wrong? Nothing, he tried to smile, but it transformed into a wince. Just a little indigestion. But the color was draining from his face, and his breathing had become shallow. I recognized the signs from the restaurant's mandatory first aid training. Call 911, I ordered Gabriella, already moving to my father's side. Possible cardiac event. The next few minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. I loosened Dad's tie and helped him into a position that eased his breathing while Gabriella cleared nearby tables to make space. Luis brought ice water and the restaurant's first aid kit. Through it all, Mother stood frozen, her anger replaced by naked fear as she watched her husband struggling for breath. James, she whispered, finally moving to kneel beside his chair. James, please be all right. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their efficient movements bringing a sense of order to the crisis. As they assessed Dad and prepared him for transport, I heard one of them ask, "Who's in charge here?" Without hesitation, 3 staff members pointed to me and said, "She is." Mother's eyes locked with mine across Dad's supine form. A moment of recognition passing between us as the carefully maintained fiction of my life crumbled completely. The ambulance ride to Memorial Hospital remains a blur in my memory. The wail of sirens, the paramedics' calm voice reporting vital signs. Dad's hand gripping mine weakly as they administered medication. Mother followed in her car, her earlier anger displaced by the more immediate fear for her husband's life. In the emergency room, I shifted automatically into the same mode I used during kitchen crises, focused, efficient, suppressing emotion to deal with immediate needs. I answered questions about Dad's medical history, medications, and recent symptoms while the medical team worked to stabilize him. Mother arrived as they were wheeling Dad away for tests, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. Mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Where are they taking him?" she demanded, her voice brittle with fear. "For an EKG and some blood work," I explained, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "The doctor thinks it might be angina rather than a full heart attack, but they need to run tests to be sure." She nodded mechanically, then seemed to remember the circumstances that had brought us here. Her expression hardened. "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't orchestrated that spectacle," she said, though the accusation lacked her usual conviction. "Mom, Dad has a heart condition," I replied evenly. "The doctor just confirmed he's been seeing a cardiologist for months." This could have happened anywhere, but it happened there, at your restaurant, during what was clearly a planned revelation designed to what? Prove me wrong? Show how successful you've become without my guidance. The waiting room was nearly empty, but I lowered my voice anyway. That's not what tonight was about. I wanted to share something important with both of you. Something I'm proud of. By ambushing us? By having your employees announce it like some theatrical reveal? I didn't plan for it to happen that way, I admitted. But yes, I wanted you to see what I've built. What your servant's work has created. Mother's eyes flashed. So, this was about revenge. About throwing your success in my face. No, it was about showing Dad something special before I stopped, unwilling to complete the thought. Before what? Before it's too late. I finished quietly. His doctor called me Mom. Not with details, but with enough to know his condition is serious. The anger seemed to drain from her, replaced by the vulnerability I'd rarely seen her display. She sank into a waiting room chair, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. "He wouldn't let me tell you," she said after a long silence. "He didn't want you to worry or feel obligated to reconnect." We sat in uncomfortable silence, the unspoken history between us filling the space more effectively than words. "Your restaurant," she finally said, not quite a question. "Yes." "How long?" "For years for Homestead. We're opening a second location next month." She nodded, absorbing this information. "And the awards the chef mentioned?" "Best New Restaurant 2 years ago. A James Beard nomination last year. Food and wine recognition." Something like surprise flickered across her face. "I read about those. I had no idea it was you." "That was intentional," I admitted. "I used SM Ventures as the company name. Kept a low profile in press." "Why?" she asked, genuinely curious now rather than accusatory. The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. I took a moment to organize my thoughts. "Because I needed to know I could do it on my own terms," I finally said. "Without your expectations or judgments. Without feeling like any success I achieved would somehow be claimed as validation for your vision rather than mine." Mother flinched slightly at the bluntness, but didn't immediately reject my explanation. "And the financial struggles I warned you about? Were those just maternal paranoia?" I laughed without humor. "No, those were very real. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked 3 jobs, lived on ramen, and nearly lost everything twice. You weren't wrong about the difficulties. You were just wrong about whether they were worth enduring." Before she could respond, a doctor in blue scrubs approached us. "Family of James Mitchell?" We both stood immediately. "I'm Dr. Warner." "Your husband is stable," he said, directing his words to Mother. "It wasn't a heart attack, but he did experience a significant angina episode, which is concerning given his history. We're going to keep him overnight for observation and run some additional tests in the morning." "Can we see him?" I asked. "Yes, but briefly. He needs rest more than anything right now." Room 412. We walked to the elevator in silence, the temporary truce of the waiting room extending as our shared concern for Dad took priority over our unresolved issues. Dad was propped up in the hospital bed looking pale, but alert, and 4 in his arm and monitors tracking his vital signs. His face brightened when he saw us enter together. "My 2 favorite women," he said, his voice weaker than normal but still warm. I'm sorry for ruining the birthday dinner. Don't be ridiculous, James' mother said, moving immediately to adjust his pillows and check his foreline. All that matters is that you're all right. I approached the other side of the bed, taking his hand carefully around the pulse monitor. How are you feeling, Dad? Embarrassed mostly, he admitted with a small smile. Not the smoothest way to find out about your success, Sammy. You knew? I asked, surprised. He squeezed my hand gently. Not specifically that Homestead was yours, no. But I knew you were doing well. His eyes twinkled with mischief despite his condition. I may be old, but I can use Google, you know. I've followed your career through restaurant reviews and industry news. Why didn't you say anything? Because you weren't ready to share it, he said simply. I figured you had your reasons, and I respected that. Mother made a small sound, something between disbelief and irritation. Those were hers to share when she was ready. So I was the only one kept in the dark, Mother said, but without her usual edge. I kept a scrapbook, Dad continued, looking at me. Every review. Your grandmother would have been too. From the doorway, a nurse cleared her throat gently. I'm sorry, but Mr. Mitchell needs to rest now. You can come back during regular visiting hours tomorrow. Mother surprised me by leaning down to kiss Dad's forehead, a gesture of tenderness I'd rarely witnessed. We'll be back first thing in the morning. Try to sleep, James. I squeezed his hand one last time. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Sammy, he replied, then added with a wink, best birthday dinner ever, despite the dramatic ending. In the hospital corridor, Mother and I stood awkwardly, the forced proximity of the crisis beginning to recede, allowing our normal distance to reassert itself. I should get back to the restaurant, I said. Check on things after all the commotion. Mother nodded. I'll go home and get some things for your father for tomorrow. We walked to the elevator in silence. As the doors opened, Mother turned to me unexpectedly. Your restaurant is impressive, Samantha, she said, the words seeming difficult for her. The food was exceptional. Coming from her, this qualified as effusive praise. I felt an unexpected warmth in my chest at the acknowledgement. Thank you, I said simply. I still don't understand why you felt you needed to keep it from us. She continued as we entered the elevator. Or why you chose that particular way to reveal it. It wasn't planned that way, I explained. When you chose Homestead for Dad's dinner, it seemed like fate. I thought it would be a positive surprise. And you couldn't have simply told us when we arrived? I considered her question seriously. I wanted you to experience the restaurant first, without knowing it was mine. To judge it on its own merits rather than as Samantha's place. The elevator reached the ground floor, and we stepped out into the quiet hospital lobby. I should drive you home, I offered, remembering she'd followed the ambulance in her own car. That's not necessary. I can call a car service to take me home and bring me back tomorrow to retrieve my vehicle. Mom, don't be ridiculous. I'll drive you home and pick you up tomorrow. She looked ready to argue, then seemed to reconsider, perhaps too exhausted for another conflict. Fine. Thank you. The drive to my parents' house was mostly silent, the familiar streets bringing back memories of earlier years. When I pulled into their driveway, Mother made no immediate move to exit the car. You've done well for yourself, she said finally, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Despite taking what I considered the wrong path. It wasn't quite an apology, but from her, it was significant. I think I needed to find my own way. I replied carefully. Even if it wasn't the one you would have chosen for me. She nodded slowly. Perhaps. After another moment of silence, she added, your father never doubted you would succeed. He always believed in your passion. The slight hesitation before passion suggested she'd substituted a more neutral word for whatever she actually thought about my culinary ambitions. Dad supported me. But he didn't push me into cooking, I said. He let me find my own path too. Mother turned slightly to face me. Is that what you think? That I tried to push you into business because I didn't believe in you? Didn't you? She shook her head, a complexity of emotions crossing her face. I pushed you toward business because I was terrified for you. Do you have any idea how difficult the restaurant industry is? How many talented people fail? I didn't want that heartbreak for you. So you thought crushing my dreams preemptively was better? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. I thought steering you toward a more secure future was my job as your mother. She countered. Was I too harsh? Probably. Did I handle it badly? Clearly. But it wasn't because I didn't believe in your abilities, Samantha. It was because I believed the system was stacked against you, no matter how talented you were. This perspective had never occurred to me, that her opposition might have stemmed from protection rather than dismissal. It didn't excuse her methods, but it reframed her motivation in a way that made it harder to maintain my anger intact. I need to go inside and gather some things for your father, she said, opening the car door. What time will you pick me up tomorrow? 8, I suggested. She nodded. 8 is fine. Good night, Samantha. As she walked toward the front door. Her posture as perfect as always despite the emotional exhaustion of the evening, I called after her. Mom? She turned, one eyebrow raised questioningly. I'm sorry about tonight. Not about wanting to share my restaurant with you, but about how it happened. I never wanted Dad to end up in the hospital. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. I know. She hesitated. Then added, your short ribs were extraordinary. Your grandmother would have been impressed. With that, she disappeared into the house, leaving me sitting in my car with the strange feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us, not a complete reconciliation, but perhaps the first cracking of a door that had been firmly closed for years. 3 months after the birthday dinner fiasco, I found myself chopping vegetables in my own kitchen, preparing a different kind of family meal. Dad had recovered fully after his doctors adjusted his medications and insisted on a stricter diet and exercise regimen. The cardiac event had been a warning sign rather than a major health crisis, but it had served as a catalyst for change in more ways than one. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel before going to answer it. My parents stood on the doorstep, Dad beaming and robust, Mother with a tentative smile and a covered dish in her hands. Right on time, I greeted them, stepping back to let them enter my home, a place neither had visited before. We brought dessert, Mother said, lifting the dish slightly. Nothing fancy. Just a cobbler. It smells amazing, I replied, genuinely surprised by the gesture. Cooking had always been Dad's domain, not hers. Dad hugged me warmly, whispering, she made it herself. Used your recipe from that magazine interview. Been practicing all week. The knowledge that Mother had not only read my interview, but attempted one of my recipes was so unexpected that I struggled to maintain my composure as I led them into my apartment. This is lovely, Samantha, Mother commented, looking around at the open-concept living area with its wall of windows overlooking the city. Very tasteful. From her, this was high praise indeed. Thanks, I said, still adjusting to this new version of our relationship. Not warm exactly, but lacking the barbed tension that had characterized our interactions for years. Dad settled comfortably onto the sofa, while Mother hovered uncertainly, clearly wanting to help but unsure of her welcome in my kitchen. Would you like to help me finish the salad? I offered, surprising myself with the invitation. She nodded, following me to the kitchen island where ingredients were laid out neatly. I handed her a knife and cutting board. The tomatoes need quartering, I instructed, returning to the pasta sauce I'd been working on. We worked in surprisingly comfortable silence for a few minutes, the rhythmic sound of our knives creating an unexpected harmony. I brought something, Mother said finally, nodding toward a large tote bag she'd set beside the counter. Some old family photos I thought you might like to have copies of. That's thoughtful, I replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. We can look through them after dinner. Dad wandered into the kitchen, opening cabinet doors curiously. Where do you keep your wine glasses, Sammy? I brought a bottle of that Cabernet you liked at Christmas. Christmas dinner had been our first attempt at a normal family gathering since the hospital incident. It had been stiff and occasionally awkward, but without the open hostility of previous years. Small steps. I pointed to the appropriate cabinet, and Dad retrieved glasses while I finished the sauce and Mother completed the salad. There was something surreal about the domesticity of the scene, the three of us moving around my kitchen, preparing a meal together as if it were a common occurrence rather than a minor miracle. Over dinner, conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected. Dad talked about his retirement projects. Mother discussed her garden club's upcoming competition, and I shared non-controversial updates about the second homestead location that had opened 2 months prior. It was after dinner, as we sat with coffee and Mother's surprisingly delicious peach cobbler, that she reached for the tote bag and began removing photo albums and loose pictures. "I've been organizing the family photos," she explained, setting them on the coffee table. "I thought you might want these for your collection." As we began leafing through the albums, I was struck by how many pictures captured moments I'd forgotten: birthday parties where I beamed at the camera, family vacations where we actually looked happy together, cooking sessions with Dad where my small hands worked alongside his larger ones. "Oh, look at this one," Dad exclaimed, pulling out a faded drawing from between the pages of an album. "Do you remember this, Sammy?" He handed me a crayon drawing I'd done at age 8, a childish rendering of a building with a sign reading "Sammy's Restaurant" in wobbly letters. I'd drawn customers with stick figure bodies and oversized heads sitting at tables while a small figure in a chef's hat stood proudly in the kitchen. "You kept this?" I asked, amazed that such an ephemeral childhood creation had survived. "Your father insisted," Mother said, a hint of fondness in her voice. "He was convinced it was prophetic." "I knew you had the passion even then," Dad said, his eyes crinkling with affection. "You were so determined." Mother touched the drawing lightly, her expression unreadable. "I was afraid for you," she admitted quietly. "The restaurant business is so brutal. So many failures. I didn't want to see you heartbroken when your dreams collapsed." The straightforward acknowledgement of her fears, without justification or defense, caught me off guard. "It hasn't been easy," I acknowledged. "There were times I nearly lost everything." "But you didn't," Dad said proudly. "No, I didn't." I looked directly at Mother. "But understanding the risks didn't make me want it any less. It just made me work harder." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. I mistook protecting you for controlling you." They felt the same to me at the time. The admission hung in the air between us, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that carried significant weight. "I brought something for you too, Dad," I said, changing the subject before emotion overwhelmed the fragile balance we'd achieved. I retrieved a wrapped package from my desk and handed it to him. He opened it carefully, his eyes widening as he revealed a shadow box frame containing the first dollar earned at Homestead, mounted alongside a small brass plaque that read, "In honor of James Mitchell, who taught me that cooking is an act of love." "Sammy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This is—" I don't know what to say. "There's more," I said. "I've established a culinary scholarship in your name at the community college. Every year. It will help a student who might not otherwise be able to afford culinary training." Dad's eyes filled with tears as he set the frame carefully on the coffee table and pulled me into a fierce hug. Over his shoulder, I saw Mother watching us, her own eyes suspiciously bright. When Dad released me, Mother cleared her throat softly. "The cobbler," she said, gesturing toward our empty dessert plates. "I used your recipe, the one from the food and wine profile. I hope I did it justice." The admission that she had not only read the article, but had attempted to recreate my recipe, a clear effort to connect through the medium that had divided us, was perhaps the most meaningful tour she could have offered. "It was perfect," I told her sincerely. "Actually better than mine." "What did you do differently?" "Added a touch more cinnamon and reduced the sugar slightly," she replied, a hint of pride in her voice. "The peaches were quite sweet on their own." "I'll have to try that next time," I said, realizing with some surprise that I genuinely meant it. As the evening wound down and my parents prepared to leave, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in their presence for over a decade. Not complete healing, there were too many years of hurt on both sides for that, but a beginning. A foundation upon which something new might be built. Standing at my door as they prepared to leave, Mother surprised me with a brief, slightly awkward hug. "Your restaurant is a remarkable achievement, Samantha," she said quietly. "I'm trying to understand the path you've chosen. even if it's not the one I would have selected. From her, it was an extraordinary concession. "Thank you," I replied simply. "That means a lot." Dad hugged me more effusively, whispering, "So proud of you, Sammy. Always have been." As their car pulled away, I returned to my kitchen and began cleaning up, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The path had been neither straight nor easy, filled with detours, obstacles, and painful choices. But standing in my own kitchen, successful on my own terms yet reconnected to my family in a new way, I understood something profound about forgiveness and growth. My mother had been wrong about many things, but perhaps right about others. Her methods had been harmful, but her intentions, at least some of them, had come from a place of protection. Understanding this didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me contextualize it, making it easier to move forward without the weight of resentment I'd carried for so long. Success hadn't come from proving her wrong, though that satisfaction had certainly been part of my motivation. True success had come from finding my authentic path and pursuing it with passion and persistence, regardless of whether others understood or approved. The most valuable lessons often come wrapped in the most challenging relationships. My mother had taught me determination and resilience, albeit unintentionally. My father had taught me passion and authenticity through his unwavering support. Together, they had shaped me in ways neither had fully intended, creating someone stronger and more capable than any of us had imagined possible. As I put away the last of the dishes, I smiled at the realization that the greatest recipe I'd ever created wasn't found on any homestead menu. It was the life I'd built, ingredient by ingredient, choice by choice, into something that satisfied not just my guests, but finally, at long last, my own heart. What relationships in your life have taught you the most difficult but valuable lessons? Have you ever had to prove someone wrong to prove yourself right? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this journey resonated with you. Thank you for being part of this healing process with me. Sometimes the most broken relationships can lead to the most beautiful growth.